I knew I should have brought whiskey to the office the day Ashton Denton strolled into Signrex like he just invented capitalism. He walked through the revolving doors wearing that smug Wall Street grin they hand out with every overpriced MBA. And when the elevator dinged open, there he was already talking about optimizing Synergido the receptionist like she gave Adam. I watched from the back, quiet, clutching my coffee like it was a holy relic. Didn't notice me. Of course hadn't. Guys like Ashton never do. Not until it's too late. The ride to the 27th floor felt like a hostage situation. Ashton was holding the whole cabin captive with his voice. Big fan of lean ops, he said, clearly not realizing that everyone in that elevator had been keeping this company running while Hugh was still getting rejection letters from firms with real standards. Then came the punk line. Wait to meet the legacy staff, he chuckled with all the smug grace of a toddler holding a lighter near a gas leak. That was me. I was the legacy staff. Quick side note, while we were still in the calm before the fire, 93% of you listening right now aren't subscribed. That's like attending my funeral and not even pretending to cry. Hit that like. Hit subscribe. It tells the team we're doing something right, and trust me, what's coming deserves front row seats. Back to Ashton. By the time we hit the 27th floor, he'd name-dropped Mackenzie, botched the pronunciation of synergetic, and called our CFO Martha instead of Martin. I stepped out first, took a long sip off bitter, burnt coffee, and exhaled through my nose like a bull prepping for slaughter. I already knew how this story would play out, or at least I thought it did. What I didn't expect, the surgical efficiency with which our new COO, fresh hire from a private equity firm in Scottsdale, reassigned me. Revolving your role, she said. We see you more in an advisory capacity moving forward, eyes on the long game. It was corporate speak for please go die quietly in a corner while the new kid takes credit for your life's work. I smiled, said thank you, nodded like a bobblehead at a tax seminar. Then I walked back to my office, shut the door, and opened a fresh manila folder, a bold Ashton Denton paper trail. Slid in a printed email chain I'd been coped on for 2 years. That was the day I stopped using SharePoint and started using my printer like it owed me money. He moved quickly. Within a week, I was off every strategy email thread I'd once created. Michael Ender was blanker than his resume. Here assigned 2 of my top analysts real talent, the kind you don't find on LinkedIn without a bribe to himself, telling them they'd have more upward visibility. They looked shell-shocked. One of them mouthed sorry to me as he packed up his ergonomic chair. I didn't fight it. I didn't beg. I just bought a new flash drive, backed up every pipeline, contact sheet, vendor chain, and investor note I'd curated since 2008. I organized it by deal stage. Labeled everything down to the cent of the boardroom at closing time. People think revenge is loud. Mine was a whisper, 1 kilobit at a time. Hess swaggered into our Thursday executive sync with a deck he didn't write and a joke about how we used to do things. Every sentence had the oily sheen off someone who thinks speed equals brilliance. I took notes, not on what he said, but on who laughed. The final straw came when he called my work foundational, but dated during an Amanda prep call. Said it with a grin right in front of the junior staff. You've laid the groundwork. Smirked. Now we build. I stared at the Zoom screen so long I started seeing dead relatives, then I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and sat in the dark for 20 solid minutes. Breathing through my teeth, legacy staff. That's what he called me. I'd show him what legacy really means. IT started with the calendar invites. One by one. They disappeared like cockroaches under a kitchen light first. It was the Thursday morning finance sync, gone, the internal bioreadiness huddles. The ones I used Torin, now I couldn't even see them. Ashton must have revoked my visibility line by line like he was chiseling my name off a tombstone. Then came the real blow, SharePoint. I logged in Monday morning to upload a revised vendor sheet. Access denied. Just a red banner across my screen like a corporate middle finger. You do not have permission to view this file. Cute. I emailed it. Reply was a masterclass in cowardice. Access to strategic growth folders is currently limited per request from VP Denton. No apology, no explanation. Like I'd been erased by God himself in a polo shirt and loafers. Ashton didn't announce any of this publicly. That would have taken spine. He operated like he a cockroach, fast, hidden, and just greasy enough to squeeze through the cracks. He started holding prep meetings without me. Where I used to present, then I noticed my junior team, 2 analysts, and a BizDev associate were suddenly all looped in on initiatives I'd never heard of. I caught one of them in the break room rehearsing a slide he clearly didn't build. When he saw me, hefflinched like I was holding a weapon. Denton wants it streamlined, he mumbled. He says like centralized leadership is key during transition stages. I nodded. He's right. Just remember who taught you what centralized means. That night I stayed late. Office dead silent except for the janitor's cart squeaking past HR. I cracked open my fireproof drawer, pulled out a stack of printed binders I hadn't touched in years. Contracts, email threads, version histories of our acquisition roadmap. Every step of the buyer pipeline, every note I'd made, every quote I'd gathered, every red line I'd fought for. I didn't just have access to the bones of this deal. I grew the skeleton. By 11:47 p.m., I was 6 cups deep into lukewarm coffee and halfway through printing out a 202-page vendor proposal that still had my initials in the footer. The printer started whining under the weight. It whispered to it like an old friend. "Not yet, sweetheart. We've still got work to do." I didn't rage. I didn't stomp into Agnon's office. Took that fury and poured it into filing tabs, timestamps, and color-coded highlighters. Ashton thought he was deleting me, but all he was really doing was forcing me to build a better version of myself offline and untouchable. And then I remembered Martin. Martin, who once told me in a back hallway during a 2015 offsite, "You're the only reason I still trust this company with 7 figures." Martin now sat on the board of the parent firm looking to absorb us like a vitamin supplement. I hadn't talked to him in over a year, but I still had the burner Gmail I used to help troubleshoot vendor disputes off-grid. I dusted it off, drafted a message. Subject: Supply Chain Continuity Legacy Escalation Body. Looping back on archival pipeline structure per prior ownership. Have original materials and version logs confirming if continuity clauses are still under your review. I read it 3 times. No names. No traceable attachments, just enough sent to get his attention. Hit send. Then I sat back in my chair staring at the last centum stamp like it was a countdown clock. Ashton had the keys to the kingdom. Booty had the blueprints, the contractor's name, and a very quiet door out the back. Knew something was coming the moment Ashton swaggered into the Monday leadership sink, wearing that cologne that smelled like insecurity, an Axe body spray, had a baby. He sat at the head of the table like he'd been born there, not parachuted in 6 weeks ago by a COO trying to impress the board with fresh blood. The room buzzed with fake laughter and cautious eye contact, the kind you get right before a firing or RORG, or both. "Before we dive into metrics," Ashton said, smoothing his tie like he just won a lawsuit against humility, "I want to share a quick update in the acquisition alignment presentation." He tapped the clicker. The TV on the far wall blinked awake. Mistamok dropped. There, in all its bastardized glory, was the pipeline architecture I'd spent 9 months crafting presented as his framework. He changed the font, stripped the color coding, slapped a new title on top, optimized Biernal Q3 expansion by Denton. But the bones mined down to the staggered rollout sequence and the red flagged vendor risks on slide 14. "This is what I'll be walking the buyers through next Friday," Ashton said, smiling like he just cured cancer with a Gantt chart. "Virginia will be supporting from the side as she's been instrumental in our foundational work." Supporting from the side, looked right at me when he said it. And I swear on everything holy, that smirk he gave me was the kind of smirk only given by men who have never been told no by a woman with more receipts than tax attorney during audit season. The room shifted subtly. A few execs looked down at their notebooks. One VPOF ops offered a hesitant nod. The same kind people give at funerals when they didn't know what else to say. I nodded back, calm, controlled. I said nothing. Didn't need to. After the meeting, I walked past the open plan cubicles, past Ashton's fake motivational quotes about hustle and grit taped to the glass walls. I passed my old team who wouldn't meet my eyes and slipped into my office, locked the door, sat down, opened the encrypted flash drive. New folder: acquisition, original materials authored by VB, subfolders. Buyer contact timeline, initial architecture drafts. Source files with MER data, red lines and version logs. Internal correspondence, pre-Ashton. It was all there. The DNA of the deal. I dragged the leaked deck into a new folder titled Plagiarized Modified by AD. Side-by-side comparisons, PDF timestamps, email trails. Audio snippets from Ollie's coping calls where I literally said out loud the phrases he now paraded as his own. Then I opened my email, drafted a single message, saved it in drafts, subject IP ownership deal flow authorship body. Please find attached timeline and file MER data showing authorship lineage for acquisition architecture stored under private credential vault can release pending legal query v. I didn't send it not yet because Ashton thought the battlefield was the boardroom. He didn't realize I'd already moved the war underground. The worst part wasn't the theft or the humiliation. Even the casual way he harassed me like I was a footnote in a deck he never had the brains to build. No. The worst part was watching my own team pretend they didn't see it. The same people I'd gone to bat for, covered for, promoted. Now sitting silent Willie a haircut in a suit rewrote my legacy in bullet points and buzzwords. But that silence, it wasn't permanent. I just needed to outlast it. And when it broke, I'd make sure the sound was deafening. Came in at 2:13 a.m. The kind of hour when even the HR bot stopped sending passive-aggressive reminders about incomplete trainings. My burner Gmail pinged once. Just a soft notification glow in the corner of my otherwise black screen. No subject line, just a file attachment named TXN Clause V3 Draft Tank and a note beneath it written like a whisper in the dark. They kept your original language. Thought you should know, and I stared at it for a moment, sipping microwave coffee that tasted like betrayal and paper clips. I'd forgotten how Martin operated, subtle, sparse, and always 20 moves ahead. The man could write a contract clause the way poets wrote eulogies. I downloaded the file, decrypted it using the old passphrase we'd set up back in 2016 during the Almer merger. Ghostwood, long story involving a hotel minibar. A flood, a shared hatred of phone business cards. The document opened, page 4, paragraph 7. There it was, my words, my structure, my tone. Operational transition shall proceed in accordance with the pre-existing continuity plan, barring disputes of authority. I exhaled slowly like I'd just seen my name carved in granite, not gone, just buried. I read it again, then I clicked into the body of the paragraph, careful not to disturb the rest of the formatting, and added a single sentence. In such cases, executive continuity will fall to the most tenor operations lead. Effective immediately upon dispute recognition. I stared at it. Not a power grab, not a smoking gun, just inevitability. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. Ashton wanted credit. He could have the applause. I wanted the outcome. I wanted the deal safe, the buyer stable, the company intact. Oh, thanks to the idiot currently parading through town halls with a wireless mic and an ego that needed its own zip code. I removed all author metadata, flattened the PDF, re-encrypted it, then sent it back. No signature, no best regards, not Race of Virginia Barnes, just a silent return to send her. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at ceiling tiles like they owed meansers. Somewhere in a skyscraper 3 time zones away, Arton would read that sentence. He knew exactly what it meant and he wouldn't say a word because men like Martin didn't need explanations. He just needed that clause to exist quietly. Like a fire escape, no one noticed until the building caught flames. The next morning, Ashton burst into the weekly all-hands meeting like Abram King who just found out the crown came with stock options. He stood up front in a tailored jacket too tight for his shoulders and delivered his updates like a man narrating his own documentary. Deal. Momentum is strong, alignment is tight. We're negotiating from a place of strength. The team applauded. I smiled and tapped my pen once against my notepad. They didn't know the deal had a heartbeat because I'd kept it alive behind the curtain. Didn't know the buyer's faith hadn't collapsed because Martin had quietly told them. She's still here. Don't worry. They didn't know that beneath the spreadsheets and logistics and jargon storms, a single sentence now sat coiled in the legal structure, waiting. Not for revenge, not even for recognition, just for the right moment. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be written in 12-point font, Times New Roman, at the bottom of page 4. Could smell the tension before you even stepped into the room. That sterile, over-conditioned hotel conference air mixed with the sweaty desperation of men trying to justify their titles. Everyone wore suits like armor, navy blue, crisp, overpriced, and clutched their coffee like it contained the last traces off-tier authority. This was it. Final acquisition meeting, the showdown. It took my seat near the far wall, not a table, near it. Next to the co-track, between a ficus and a silent speakerphone unit blinking in soft apology. No notepad, no laptop. Just mean a small manila envelope, unlabeled, resting quietly beside my folded hands across the room. Ashton held court like he was auditioning for a role in a movie he didn't understand. He paced as Hess spoke, that telltale nervous energy disguised as bravado, voice just loud enough to drown out nuance. So to reiterate, he said, hopping on a slide that could have been made by a board and turn with a free PowerPoint template. We've streamlined operational continuity through vertical integration. The deal's locked. Transition will be seamless. We the upside. We control the transition. He flashed a smile at the buyer's lead counsel, Angela Pierce, a woman with cheekbones that could cut glass and a legal mind built entirely off razors. She didn't smile back, just tilted her head slightly. She was watching a child explain how airplanes work. I do have a question, she said, her voice like chilled Jean. Section 7 references a continuity clause. I'd like clarification on that language. Ashton waved it off like a mosquito. Standard stuff. Boilerplate. It doesn't affect the buyer's rights. All transition authority routes through my office, legal knows that. He didn't even glance in my direction. Angela looked over at me. I didn't move, didn't blink, just placed one fingertip on the edge of the envelope, gave it the gentlest nudge like I was testing the weight oscillants. Ashton was still talking about synergies, about momentum, about value acceleration. He dropped jargon bombs like he thought they'd explode into credibility, scalable leverage, asset harmonization, stakeholder fluidity. Somewhere, a thesaurus cried out in pain. The lead investor, Martin, sat at the far end of the table, still calm, watching. Hadn't said a word yet, which was the financial world's version of God clearing his throat. As I was saying, Ashton continued, spinning the remote in his hand like a magician prepping a trick. We've pre-aligned all department heads and scope deliverables. There's no ambiguity on who's steering the ship. That's why I've taken point on this. The slide behind him showed an org chart with his name glowing like the sun. My name gone erased like a typo. He thought no one would notice. Angela turned a page in her binder slowly. Martin leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That envelope beside me was still untouched, because you don't have to raise your voice when the words are already planted. You don't need a laptop when the power's already shifted. You don't need to interrupt a man digging his own grave. Just quietly hand him a sharper shovel. I glanced around the room. CO stiff as a board. CFO pretending not tosswet through his collar. One junior associate texting beneath the table, probably updating a resume just in case. Ashton was still going. Point is, he said, clapping his hands together. This deal runs smooth because I've simplified the handoff. We've got alignment. We've exit vision. And frankly, we've got control. That's how we do things at Cinerex under this leadership. He smiled again. Then right on cue, he said at that line when I had waited 3 months to hear "Do you know who I am?" And the room finally stopped breathing. Angela Pierce was mid-sentence, parsing a clause with all the precision of a surgeon slicing open a tumor when Ashton did the thing he knew he would. The thing he couldn't not do. He interrupted her loudly, abruptly, with a hand gesture that somehow managed to insult both her intelligence and her manicure. "Look," he said, his voice rising with that frat boy confidence that smells like Red Bull and failing upward. "Do you know who I am?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. The kind you throw out when you've cornered yourself in a lie and think sheer volume can rescue you. And just like that, the room froze. Angela's pen paused mid-glide. The junior analyst, who'd been nervously chewing on his pen cap, stopped mid-bite. Even the projector seemed to hold its breath, fans suddenly too loud in the silence he left behind. I didn't move for a second. Then slowly, like I was brushing lint off the fabric off reality, I reached over, picked up the manila envelope, and pulled out a single matte black business card. No logo. No title, just white lettering on thick textured stock. Virginia Barnes, Executive Advisor, Operations Continuity. I slid it across the tableau to Angela without a word. She picked it up delicately, turned it over, her eyebrows ticked upward just a fraction, then she looked up at Martin. Martin didn't say a word. He just leaned back in his chair, lips curling into a smirk like he'd been waiting for this moment since the Stone Age. Then he turned to Ashton. "Actually, son, do you know who she is?" Boom. It didn't come with music or slow motion camera pans, but it might as well have. Because Ashton blinked, then blinked again for the first time since he stepped foot into this company. He didn't have a damn word to say, his mouth opened, but nothing came out. Like a fish flopping on the deck, suddenly aware it's no longer in control of the water. Angela gently placed the business card down on the binder in front of her. She flipped a few pages, then she found it. Clause 7B, Transition Protocols. Her voice, when it came, was silk wrapped around a dagger. Funny name matches the signature metadata embedded in our earliest clause draft. You wouldn't happen to know how that language got in here, would you? Ashton looked down at this folder, flipping pages like maybe, just maybe, there was an escape hatch hiding between the lines. Martin just chuckled under his breath. "Sit down," he said. Not loud, not harsh, just final. Ashton did because there was nothing else to do. I sat perfectly still, hands folded, breathing steady. I didn't gloat. I didn't grin. That wasn't the move. Because the best part about power isn't showing it off. It's knowing exactly when to say nothing and letting everyone else feel it quake beneath their chairs. Angela didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. She opened her thick leather-bound folder like she was slicing open a chest cavity. Her hands moved with surgical precision. Tabs, highlights, red ribbons sticking out like arteries. She flipped to the page with the grace of a priest flipping scripture midsman. Clause 7B, Transition Oversight and Continuity Protocols, she said, reading aloud. Her voice cut through the room like piano wire. Martin adjusted his cufflinks. The COO shifted in his chair like his spine suddenly remembered it had guilt. Angela's eyes scanned the page, slow, deliberate, and then she read it word for word. In such cases, executive continuity will fall to most tenured operations lead effective immediately upon dispute recognition. The silence that followed felt biblical. You could hear Ashton's throat click as he swallowed hard. His face lost all its fresh tan arrogance and turned the kind of pale you only see when a man realizes he's been playing Monopoly and everyone else is dealing in cash. This wasn't in the last draft, he stammered, flipping through his own thinner folder like maybe, just maybe, the universe had printed him a different reality. Angela tilted her head calmly. It's in the signed one. She slid her copy across the table, Theon with the ink still fresh from the do-sign timestamp. My clause, my words, missignature hidden deep in the metadata where only someone like Angela would bother to look. Ashton looked to the COO. She didn't even blink. Just stared at the claws like it had personally betrayed her, like the blood on the floor was hers, and no one had told her she was bleeding. Martin finally spoke. I believe that satisfies the legal concern. He didn't look at Ashton. Didn't need to. Angela turned a few more pages. According to this language, the moment a dispute occurs, such as conflicting statements of control or unauthorized chain of command, transition responsibility is automatically reassigned to the most tenured operations lead. Her eyes flicked toward me. No emotion, just fact. I sat still, calm, my hands resting gently on the edge of the table like I'd always been there. Ashton blinked once, twice. This clause rewrites the entire. Angela raised a hand. It enforces what was already approved. You should have read the full document before signing off on a version you didn't write. Opened his mouth again, but nothing useful came out. Just fragments, noise. Martin stood up slowly. We appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Denton, but this meeting is now under Miss Barnes' purview. He looked at me. That was the first time my name had been said aloud in the room, and it didn't need fireworks, just gravity. I nodded once, then reached into the same envelope I'd brought in earlier, pulled out a slim binder, original source documents tabbed and timestamped, handed it silently to Angela. She took it without a word, flipped to the front page. Then smiled, not wide, just enough. And that's when I knew the game had shifted, not with a bang, but with a sentence on page 4. Angela closed the binder like a judge banging a gavel. One smooth motion, no raised voice, nor room for debate. Then she turned to Martin with that same icy elegance and said, per clause 7b, like to proceed with transition to the most tenured operations lead, effective immediately. Martin didn't miss a beat. We'll honor that request. Just like that, the room cracked clean down the middle. Ashton jolted forward in his chair, hands played like he was stopping a car crash mid-impact. Hold on. Wait. Yotsant just switch point mid-meeting. We've already submitted the deliverables under my office. The strategy alignment's been routed through me. This doesn't make sense. Martin didn't even look at him. He turned his gaze toward Angela. Any risk from a protocol change? She barely shrugged. No disruption expected. Frankly, the documentation stider under Barnes. That one sentence landed like a guillotine. Ashton looked to the COO, desperation rising behind his eyes now, his confidence curdling into panic. Karen, say something. You brought me in for this exact transition. You told the board. The COO didn't say a word. She simply stood, walked behind Ashton's chair, and picked up his compagnie tablet like it was radioactive. No eye contact, no speech, just a soft nod toward the hallway. The kind of nod that said, your services are no longer required. Please collect your ego and go. He froze, then looked at me. I didn't gloat, didn't move, just met Heises like he was already in the rearview mirror. Angela spoke again. Proceed with Miss Barnes as our liaison. Her original architecture aligns more closely with investor risk models, and she has a pre-existing trust record with our due diligence team. The translation was simple. She's been the adult in the room the whole time. We're done pretending otherwise. Martin leaned forward, elbows on the table. We're investing in stability, not bluster. That was it. The nail in the coffin, not shouted, not underlined, just delivered with the calm of a man who signs checks bigger than most people's retirements. Ashton looked around the room one last time. Nobody met his gaze. Not the COO, not the junior analyst he'd hijacked from my team, not even the intern who used to hang on his every acronym. He opened his mouth to object again, then thought better of it. He stood up slow, shoulders sagging, suit wrinkled now under the fluorescent lights. Looked down at the table like maybe somewhere his name would still be carved in the wood. But it wasn't because he never built anything here. He just borrowed the spotlight. And now it was mine again. Not because I yelled, not because I demanded, but because I'd written the script and stayed silent long enough to let everyone else realize they'd been reading the wrong damn lines. Ashton stood at the threshold of the conference room, jaw slack, breath shallow. Like Amon who just realized the GPS he followed led him straight into traffic. His suit jacket, so crisp this morning, now hung crooked off his shoulders. Like even the fabric was ashamed to be seen with him. He turned slowly. One last shot at reclaiming some shred of power. His voice, cracked low, finally broke the hush hanging over the room. You did this. Everyone turned to me. I didn't blink. Didn't move. Just let the silence stretch long enough for the shame to burn into his skin. Then finally, I smiled. The kind of smile you save for when your body's done aching, and all that's left is clarity. I wrote the playbook, I said, voice smooth and calm as rainfall. You just read the headlines. His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out because what could he say? He hadn't just lost the room. He'd been disqualified from it, not because he was too young or too green or even too smug, but because he never bothered to learn the rules. I made them. Angela slid her folder shut. Martin stood up and walked toward me, slow, deliberate. He held a slim, dark folder in his left hand. Same kind they only bring out when what's inside changes the direction of your whole damn life. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it. Inside, a formal letter from the parent firm, invitation to join the strategic committee. Top-level advisory reporting directly to the board. No fluff, no preamble, just legacy on paper. My fingertips rested on the signature line, tracing the letters like they were braille, carved into history. Ashton watched from the doorway like a man who just learned gravity worked differently now. That up was no longer up. That the woman he'd sidelined had not only written the rules, she'd already rewritten the ending. Lingered a moment longer, waiting for someone to stop him, to rescue him, to say his name. No one did. The COO was still seated. Angela had already turned back to her binder. The intern was refreshing a spreadsheet. The CFO was texting under the table. The room had moved on. And then, so did he. He turned and walked out. The glass door side shut behind him. I didn't watch him go. Didn't need to. Instead, I looked back at the conference table. A table now scattered with contracts I designed, clauses I'd written, decisions I'd made in the shadows. While Ashton was playing charades with titles, I sat down, one hand still resting on the new offer folder. No gloating, no dramatics, just peace, the kind that comes from knowing you don't need to be loud to win. You just have to outlast the noise long enough to become the silence that follows. Big thanks you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch flicking chaos alive. Your ex-bosses haking in their loafers.